Hi, gang. So we're going to talk about the forms of fiction this week, and some of it's going to be some review of things we've gone over before. But I wanted to show these two methods of structuring stuff together because they're not your only options, but they're sort of your key options. And as we'll see, let's take a look. Here we go. So, with forms of fiction, what we talk about so often is the engine of the story, which is to say, what is it that's driving the readers through from page one to the final page? And related to that is what questions are the readers asking of our work? One common question: what's going to happen, or what's going to happen next? This is a sort of plot-driven kind of thing. And the second question is: who is this person? Or who are these characters? It's chiefly the protagonists. We just want to figure out, they seem peculiar to us or interesting, and we want to figure out who they are and why they are that way. So these are often the questions you ask of yourself as writers too, right? What can I have happen next? Or who's this character that I've just come up with? So that's one of the ways you know what kind of story you're dealing with, and as we'll see, these kinds of stories overlap, but they just deal with sort of, as writers, the choices you're making at a step by step level of how to sort of get through to the end. So we'll look at strategies today. I'm getting you through from beginning to end. So question one, again, what's going to happen or what's going to happen next? We've got plot driven fiction. Plot and the events and the order of events become the engine that drives the reader forward. Freytag's triangle, then, your dear old friend, is your central shape. Right? So you've got your your central conflict being established all the way to the climax action. You see this again and again and again. It's my favorite thing to bring up in fiction. But then you have this middle part, right, of developing the conflict that we haven't talked about much. So let's spend some time on that today. There are two ways. There are many ways, but for essentially two ways to develop this conflict. One is escalation, which, as it says here, it's when the impact or the effect of the conflict keeps getting more and more serious, right? The stakes keep just raising higher and higher. Bartholomew's The School is a very good example of this. If you remember, that's the one where everything dies, and it begins with, some plants, and then some sort of lower level animals like insects, I think, and fish, and then puppies. We weren't even supposed to have a puppy, and then the foreign exchange student, and then people's parents, and everything gets, that's how it works, and that's how it achieves its comedy, but also how it moves, right, from the initial death to the ultimate death. One of the other things you can do to establish that sort of seriousness is to set up a timeline, right? So if you've got a situation where the love of your protagonist's life is moving to Paris in 2 weeks, suddenly you've got 2 weeks to resolve whatever conflicts are keeping these people apart. And that, as the days tick by, that is a natural way to kind of beef up the urgency and raise the stakes. So it's always nice, I like to think, when I'm putting the stories together, it's like, okay, how far from now does this story need to be resolved? And the sooner you can make it, the more tense and the greater sense of urgency your story is going to have. The other option you have is alternation, which is when the danger of the conflict gets solved sort of immediately, or at least lessened, but then that leads to newer dangers and obstacles. Okay, so Cinderella is this great example here. So if you remember with Cinderella, the situation is that her life is really crappy. She sweeps the cinders, hence her name, and she's all ashy and dirty and has no pretty dresses and evil siblings, step siblings, I guess. But then the prince is looking for a princess, and everyone's eligible that they can just go to the ball. So it's like, yay! It's like a positive, a bonus for her. But she can't go to the ball, according to her evil stepmother. But then the fairy godmother comes and gives her the means. But there's a catch. She can only do this temporarily, and then at midnight she has to revert back to her old self. So then she goes, and she actually gets to meet the prince, and he falls in love with her. But she can't seal the deal before midnight. So then, negative again. But she leaves a shoe in running, so that's a way for him to get in touch with her. But she's hidden when he goes around to try the shoe. So you see what I mean? I don't want to belabor the whole thing. This is very common with fairy tales, but even just regular stories, right? You give the reader a little, and then you take away. Which is to say, you give the protagonist a little toward his or her goal, and then you take it away, and then give them something else to deal with. And it is like a tease, as it says here, right? We as readers love it. It's kind of being drawn toward the climax action, but then kept, so it's not too You don't want it to happen too easily, because then we'll get bored. So you have to like give us little, and it's like I mean, I'm using terms like teasing and climaxing. You get the drift, right? This is why we love stories. It can actually be fun, even if it's a little bit of torture.